The first shot is not the worst part. The worst part is what happens after it when nobody stands up again. A squad is halfway across a field line, boots sinking into cold mud, breath hanging low. Then a crack, sharp, clean, and a man folds without a scream. The sound is too fast to chase. It does not feel like a battle. It feels like a rule being enforced. Seconds pass, nobody moves. A medic shifts his weight and stops. A radio man raises his head an inch, then freezes as if the air itself is dangerous. You can hear everything now. A strap creaking, a canteen tapping a belt buckle, the wind brushing dead grass. The rifle is quiet again, but the lane stays dead. That is what a sniper really sells on a battlefield. It is not just a kill count, it is control of movement and time. When men are afraid to lift their heads, they stop observing. When they stop observing, they stop coordinating. When they stop coordinating, the attack becomes a series of separate, nervous guesses. And the moment the pace breaks, the defender is no longer reacting. The defender is deciding. This is why the Allies feared the idea of a Kar-98K sniper, even though the Karabiner 98K was, on paper, a bolt-action service rifle in a world of machine guns, mortars, and artillery. A bolt-action rifle should not be able to stop and advance. Yet again and again, across forests, ruins, hedgerows, ridgelines, and road junctions, a scoped Kar-98K in the right hands created something larger than a weapon. It created pressure, quiet, constant, and surgical. Pressure that made time expensive and movement risky. To understand that fear, you have to strip away the myth first. The Kar-98K was not designed as a sniper rifle from the start. It was Germany's standard infantry rifle. Rugged, accurate enough for a trained soldier, and built around the Mauser 98 action, a system famous for strong lockup and dependable feeding. In the hands of ordinary infantry, it was a workhorse. A Kar-98K sniper was something else. Selected rifles, selected men, and an optic that changed how one soldier could shape a lane. Some of the confusion comes from optics themselves. People hear scope and imagine a high-powered telescope that turns any rifle into a laser. World War II did not work like that. Germany used several optic solutions over time, and not all of them were true sniper glass. The ZW41, for example, is often associated with the Kar-98K, but it is low magnification and sits forward, more a designated marksman aid than a classic long-range sniper optic. It helps with target clarity and aiming precision, but it does not magically turn a rifle into a long-distance executioner. What mattered more than the label was the system, a rifle that could put a first shot where it needed to go, an optic that let the shooter identify and commit to that shot, and a doctrine that taught him where to sit so the enemy paid in hesitation. Because bolt action speed is not the advantage. Bolt action speed is the limit. A sniper working a Kar-98K is not trying to fire fast. He is trying to fire once, clean, and then let the fear do the rest. He chooses positions that punish predictable movement, a gap between two trees, a ruined second-floor window, a bend in a road, a hedgerow opening, the edge of a ridge where silhouettes appear for a heartbeat. He watches not just bodies but behavior. He waits for the man who points, the man who waves forward, the man who leans to look longer than the others. One shot in the right place changes the lane. After that, the rifle does not have to keep firing to keep winning. The lane itself becomes a warning, and warnings are powerful because men begin to do the sniper's work for him. They crouch, they delay, they choose the longer route. They stop to argue about cover, they crawl when they should run, they bunch up where they should spread out. The tempo dies. That is the real sniper effect. And once you see it that way, the Kar-98K becomes easier to understand, not as a mythical best rifle, but as a reliable tool inside a pressure doctrine. The cartridge matters here too, but not in the way people brag about it. The 7.92 by 57 millimeter Mauser is not magic. It is a consistent full-power rifle round that carries reach and punch in plain language. It stays effective across the distances where lanes are decided, it hits hard enough to be decisive, and it rewards good fundamentals. In field conditions, cold, mud, variable wind, imperfect rests, consistency is what gives a shooter confidence to commit to the first shot. Because the first shot is the story. If your first shot is trustworthy, you can afford patience. If you can afford patience, you can choose the right moment. And if you choose the right moment, you do not have to win a gunfight. You win a decision. This is why the fear spread so fast among Allied units. Not because every German sniper was a legend, but because the possibility forced caution. Every suspicious tree line became a tax on movement. Every broken wall became a question. Every exposed officer, medic, and radio man became a risk calculation. And the moment a unit starts calculating risks instead of executing a plan, the defender has already achieved something valuable: time. In the next segment, we will get specific about performance that matters. Not internet claims, but practical realities. What optics change and what they do not. Why bolt action limitations shape tactics, and how one clean shot can lock down an entire lane. Then we will step into the theaters where this pressure was most painful, and why the Allies developed their own counter-sniper rhythm to break it. Because the real story is not the Kar-98K was the best. The real story is how a scoped bolt-action rifle, paired with skill and doctrine, could make an army feel pinned to the ground. So what did Kar-98K sniper really mean in World War II? It did not mean Germany issued a magical sniper rifle to every unit. It meant something narrower and more deliberate: selection, setup, and a man trained to turn a rifle into control. The Karabiner 98K was the standard service rifle. Millions existed in ordinary infantry hands. Most were never intended to be sniper rifles. The sniper effect came from choosing the right rifles from the pile, fitting them with optics and mounts that held zero, and pairing them with men who understood patience, angles, and timing. Selection mattered because bolt actions live and die by the first shot. If the rifle prints consistently, the shooter can commit. If it shifts, the shooter hesitates, and hesitation ruins the entire pressure system. In practice, sniper rifles were often picked for better inherent accuracy, then set up with mounts and optics that could survive movement, weather, and rough handling. This is where myths begin, because people hear scope and assume one thing. World War II German optics were not a single standard. There were different solutions across years, factories, and front conditions. Some optics setups were true sniping tools with enough magnification to identify and place shots at longer ranges. Others were closer to a sharpshooter concept, improving aim and target clarity at moderate distances, but not turning every engagement into a long-range execution. The ZF-41 is the classic example of confusion. It is often connected to the Kar-98K, but it is low magnification and positioned forward. It can help a good shooter see and place better shots within practical ranges, especially when visibility is poor. but it is not the same as a higher magnification optic used for deliberate, long-range target work. If you build your entire story on scope equals sniper, you miss what really made Allied units tense. What mattered was not the optic alone. What mattered was how the optic fit into a pressure doctrine. A German sniper did not need to fire often. He needed to make the enemy believe that any exposed movement would be punished. That belief changes everything. It makes men slow down. It makes leaders hesitate to stand and point. It makes medics wait. It makes radio operators keep antennas low. It makes squads bunch up behind the same cover because nobody wants to cross the open lane first. The rifle becomes a tempo weapon. And once you view the Kar-98K sniper that way, you can understand why a bolt action could feel powerful in a mechanized war. A bolt action is not built for spraying. It is built for certainty. The system rewards a shooter who can wait for the exact second when the target becomes decisive. Now we can talk about performance, but we have to talk about it the right way. Not best rifle on paper. Performance that matters in the field. Reach, consistency, and first shot confidence under pressure. The 7.92 by 57 millimeter Mauser cartridge is a full power rifle round. In plain language, that means it carries authority at the distances where lanes are decided. It stays effective across open ground, along hedgerow gaps, through ruined streets and across ridge lines. It hits hard enough to be final, and it remains stable enough that a trained shooter can predict it, if he does his part. But a cartridge does not fight by itself. The real advantage is what it allows a sniper to do to a lane. If the round and rifle combination lets you trust the shot, you can hold your fire until the target is worth the risk of revealing your position. That is the bolt action trade. Slower follow-ups, but a higher emphasis on making the first shot count, then disappearing before the response lands. A bolt action limitation becomes a tactical personality. The Kar-98K sniper is not trying to win with volume. He wins with rhythm. He fires when the enemy is committed, mid-step, mid-signal, mid-lean, then relocates or waits for the panic to do the work. In many cases, the fear after the shot is more valuable than a second shot, because a second shot costs you. After one clean hit, the enemy starts searching. Someone calls out a direction. Someone sprays suppressive fire into likely cover. Someone throws smoke. Someone tries to flank. Artillery begins probing tree lines, windows, and rubble piles. The lane becomes noisy, unpredictable, dangerous. So the skilled sniper's follow-up is often not a second trigger pull. It is vanishing. This is why optics matter, but not as a fantasy. An optic helps with identification. It helps separate a helmet from a stump. It helps confirm that the man leaning forward is an officer, not just another rifleman. It helps judge whether the target is exposed enough to justify the shot. And it helps the shooter place the first shot precisely when stress is high and time is narrow. What optics do not do is replace skill. They do not remove wind. They do not stabilize a shaky rest. They do not fix poor range judgment. They do not guarantee a hit if the shooter cannot control breathing and trigger pressure. In other words, the optic makes the system possible, but the man makes it real. And the Mauser action at the center of the rifle supports this system with something less glamorous but more important: reliability. In mud, cold, and rough handling, feeding and extraction must remain trustworthy. A stoppage is not just inconvenient for a sniper. It is catastrophic. It burns time, creates noise, and ruins the calm that makes precision possible. When everything works, the effect is simple and brutal. One clean shot can freeze a whole lane, not because every man is hit, but because every man believes he could be the next one if he moves wrong. The lane becomes a no-go zone. The unit's tempo collapses. The defender gains minutes. And in war, minutes decide whether a position is reinforced, whether artillery is shifted, whether a retreat stays organized, whether an attack arrives on schedule. That is why the Allies feared the waiting. The rifle was a tool, the fear was the weapon. In the next segment, we will put this pressure system into real settings, where it hurt the most. We will move through the theaters and the typical scenarios that created sniper lanes, long sight lines and ruins, hedgerows and road bends, ridge lines and choke points. Then we will show how Allied units fought back, not with one perfect trick, but with patience, smoke, suppressive fire, maneuver, and the slow logic of counter-sniper hunting. Because once the enemy controls your movement, the first battle is simply getting your head back up. Once the Allies understood what the Kar-98K sniper really was, a pressure system, they stopped looking for a single heroic solution. They started treating counter-sniping like engineering. Break the conditions that make the system work. The first tool was smoke, not because smoke wins fights, but because it buys movement. A sniper lane is built on visibility. If you deny the shooter a clean view, you deny him the certainty he needs for that first shot. Smoke did not make men brave. It made the lane uncertain, and uncertainty is expensive for a bolt-action marksman who lives on confidence. The second tool was noise and volume, but used with discipline. Suppressive fire was not about killing the sniper with luck. It was about forcing him to keep his head down, forcing him to pause, forcing him to relocate. A German sniper with a Kar-98K could dominate a lane when he controlled the rhythm. Suppression tried to steal that rhythm and replace it with chaos. The third tool was maneuver, and this is where counter-sniping became a battle of patience. Units learned to move in small teams, to probe from multiple angles, and to avoid feeding the same lane repeatedly. If a hedgerow gap was deadly, the answer was not to push more bodies through it. The answer was to move around it or to reshape it, smoke it, shell it, cut it, or approach it from a flank where the sniper's position no longer commanded the route. Artillery joined the logic, not as a magic sniper detector, but as a pressure response. If a shot came from a likely tree line, likely window, likely rubble pile, artillery could probe those zones. Even if it did not kill the shooter, it could force relocation. And relocation is the moment snipers hate most. Moving with a rifle and optic through rubble and mud while the enemy is watching for the shift. Then came the hardest part: spotting. The German sniper's advantage was that he fired rarely. If he fired too often, he became easy to bracket. If he fired once and then vanished, he could keep the lane poisoned for minutes, sometimes hours. The Allied response became a kind of hunting discipline. Watch for unnatural shapes. Watch for disturbed grass. Watch for a glint that appears and disappears. Watch for an empty window that suddenly looks occupied. Watch for a sound that does not belong. A sniper duel in World War II was rarely cinematic in the way people imagine. It was slow, uncomfortable, and deeply human. One man waited for another man to make a mistake, and both men knew that a single mistake could be the last one. Often the first decisive moment was not the shot, it was the decision to move. And this is why Kar-98K sniper fear was never simply about the rifle's statistics. It was about the way the rifle fit the human problem of fear and leadership. The officer problem became real. In many units, leadership depended on visibility, an officer standing, pointing, calling a direction, pulling the attack forward by presence. Sniper pressure punished that behavior. When leaders could not safely expose themselves, orders slowed. Signals became smaller and more cautious. Momentum died. The tempo kill was the deeper wound. An attack is a sequence. Move, observe, coordinate, move again. Snipers attacked that sequence. They did not have to destroy the unit to win value. They only had to make movement costly. When a unit begins spending minutes to cross 10 meters, the defender is not just surviving. The defender is shaping the day. This is also where myth and reality can finally be separated cleanly. The myth says the Kar-98K was the best sniper rifle, as if one weapon dominates every front in every condition. Reality is more disciplined. The best sniper effect is a combination of rifle, optic, ammunition consistency, training, doctrine, and terrain. In some environments, a rifle like the Kar-98K, reliable, accurate enough, paired with an optic and a patient shooter, creates brutal pressure. In other environments, different tools shine. A semi-automatic can reward follow-up speed. A different optic can reward higher magnification. A different doctrine can fit different ground. And that is the real reason the Kar-98K sniper story matters. It teaches a lesson that applies across World War II. Weapons do not exist alone. They exist inside systems. A rifle does not stop an army. A system stops an army. Fear, visibility, lanes, leadership, tempo, and the quiet logic that turns one shot into a frozen field. If you want to go further, the next comparison writes itself. Allied platforms each offered a different answer to the same problem. The British Lee-Enfield No. 4, TIE, carries its own logic of accuracy and doctrine. The Soviet Mosin Nagant PU reflects a different front, different distances, different training patterns. The American M1903A4 sits in its own space of practicality and availability. Each can be best in the right terrain, with the right man, under the right doctrine. So if the myth asks, which rifle was best? The better question is, which setup controlled the lane? Because on the ground, the lane decides who moves, who leads, and who survives the next minute. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this WWII firearm story, please subscribe for more full episodes. The subscribe link is in the description.